Ring them no red roses, a pocket full of posies. Achoo! Achoo! We all flop down, made proper death. The king slid out with his daughter to fetch a pail of water. Achoo! Achoo! We all flop down. Got their 80 grand. The bird up on the table, looking down on all the people. We all flop down, cheeky as you like. The cows out in the meadow, knocked out, so bleeding in the bush. No,
Remember how we started this whole journey? With that image of 4-year-olds sitting cross-legged on scratchy carpet, giggling as they sang about the Black Death, like it was the most natural thing in the world? Well, here we are at the end of our shadow work expedition, and it's time to come back to that moment. Because now that we've walked through falling cradles and crumbling bridges and crooked houses, I think you're ready to see what was really happening in that circle of innocent children. They weren't just singing a song. They were participating in one of humanity's oldest and most profound rituals, the dance with death itself. And the really wild part? They were doing it with pure joy. I keep coming back to this image because it captures something essential about shadow work, about being human, about the strange alchemy that happens when we stop running from the darkness and start dancing with it instead. Those kids weren't traumatized by singing about plague and death. They were empowered by it. They were learning, in the most visceral way possible, that even the scariest things can be transformed through community, through ritual, through the simple act of holding hands and facing it together. That's what we've been doing in this book, you and I. We've been holding hands in a circle, singing the scary songs, and learning that we don't have to fall down alone. Let's get the historical stuff out of the way first, because the backstory of this rhyme is even darker than I let on in the introduction. While scholars debate whether Ring Around the Rosie definitively refers to the Black Death, some argue it's much newer, maybe from the 19th century. The plague interpretation has stuck around for a reason. It captures something true about the human experience that transcends any specific historical event. Whether our ancestors were literally singing about bubonic plague or metaphorically processing the ever-present reality of mortality, they created a children's game that's essentially a crash course in existential acceptance. Think about the mechanics of it. You join hands with others, you move in a circle, you acknowledge the signs of doom, you prepare as best you can, pocket full of posies, and then you surrender to the inevitable. We all fall down. But here's the shadow work gold. After you fall down, what happens? You get back up. You laugh. You do it again. The falling isn't the end of the game. It's just part of the cycle. That's the wisdom our ancestors embedded in this deceptively simple song. Life is a circle, not a straight line. Death is not a failure, it's a transition. And the scariest things become manageable when you do them together, with intention, as a ritual rather than as a random catastrophe. But we live in a culture that's spent the last century trying to sanitize death, to push it to the margins, to pretend it's something that happens to other people in other places at convenient times when we're prepared for it. We've lost the ability to dance with mortality, to sing about it, to incorporate it into our daily awareness in healthy ways. So it goes underground, into our anxiety about aging, into our obsession with staying young, staying healthy, staying relevant, into our terror of being forgotten, of not maturing, of running out of time, into our compulsive busyness, our frantic accumulation of experiences and achievements and Instagram-worthy moments, all in service of avoiding the one thing we're all going to do eventually. We all fall down, but we've forgotten how to do it gracefully. Here's what I love most about the structure of this game. It's a circle, not a line where someone wins and someone loses, not a hierarchy where some people get to stay standing while others fall. A circle where everyone is equal, everyone participates, everyone falls together. That circle is the container that makes the shadow work possible. It's the community that says, yes, we're all going to die, and we don't have to be alone with that knowledge. It's the ritual space that transforms terror into play, isolation into connection, helplessness into agency. When I work with people on their death anxiety, and honey, we all have death anxiety, even if we call it something else, the transformation always happens the same way. First, They stop trying to carry the fear alone. They find others who are willing to look directly at mortality instead of pretending it's not there. They create circles, literal or metaphorical, where it's safe to say, "I'm scared of dying," or "I'm terrified that my life doesn't matter," or "I wake up at 3 a.m. sometimes wondering what happens when it's all over." And then something magical happens. The fear doesn't disappear, but it becomes workable. It becomes part of the human experience instead of a personal failing. It becomes something you can dance with instead of something you have to run from. Let's talk about those posies for a minute, because this is where the shadow work gets really practical. In the plague version of the story, people carried flowers and herbs because they believed these would protect them from disease. Scientifically, they were useless against the Black Death. But psychologically, they were everything. Those posies represented agency in the face of helplessness. They were the human refusal to go down without a fight, even when the fight was ultimately unwinnable. They were hope in the face of despair, beauty in the face of horror, an assertion of life in the face of death. What are your posies? What are the things you carry to help you feel less helpless in the face of life's uncertainties? Maybe it's your morning meditation practice, your evening glass of wine, your weekend hikes in the woods. Maybe it's your savings account, your insurance policies, your carefully planned 5-year goals. Maybe it's your relationships, your creative projects, your commitment to causes bigger than yourself. Here's the shadow work piece. None of these things will actually save you from the fundamental uncertainties of human existence. Your meditation won't prevent loss. Your savings won't guarantee security. Your relationships won't protect you from loneliness. Your art won't make you immortal. But that doesn't make them meaningless. Just like those medieval posies, they're not actually about controlling the outcome. They're about maintaining your humanity while you're here. They're about choosing how you want to meet whatever comes. They're about the beauty and dignity of trying, even when, especially when, you know the effort might not be enough. The shadow shows up when we forget this distinction. When we start believing our posies are actually magic, that we can control outcomes through perfect behavior, positive thinking, or elaborate contingency plans. When we become attached to our coping mechanisms in ways that make us more anxious instead of less, more rigid instead of more resilient. Now let's talk about the falling down, because this is where most people get stuck in their shadow work around mortality and impermanence. We've been conditioned to see falling as failure. Falling means you weren't strong enough, smart enough, careful enough. Falling means you did something wrong. Falling is what happens to other people, people who don't have their shit together like you do. But in the game, falling isn't failure, it's the whole point. The circle exists for the falling. The song builds to the falling. The joy is in the falling together, in the shared surrender, in the collective acknowledgement that this is how it ends for all of us. This is revolutionary stuff in a culture that sells us the fantasy of endless growth, perpetual optimization, and the possibility of avoiding all the hard parts of human existence through enough money, technology, or spiritual practice. The shadow work here is learning to fall gracefully, learning to see endings as completions rather than failures, learning to find beauty in transitions, even painful ones, learning to trust that falling down doesn't mean staying down. I think about the clients I've worked with who were terrified of aging, of retirement, of their kids growing up and leaving home. All versions of the same fear. What happens when this phase of my life ends? Who am I if I'm not who I used to be? The ones who do the best are the ones who learn to see these transitions as part of the dance rather than as catastrophes to be avoided. They grieve what's ending, because grief is appropriate when things end, but they don't get stuck in the grief. They fall down. They feel the impact. They let themselves be still for a moment, and then they get back up to see what the next circle might bring. Some versions of the rhyme say ashes, ashes instead of adishu, which was supposed to represent sneezing, another plague symptom. I prefer the ashes version because it gets at something profound about how endings become beginnings. Ashes are what's left after the fire burns through everything combustible. They're the residue of destruction, the evidence of loss. But they're also fertilizer. They're what feeds the new growth that comes after the burning. Every major transition in your life, every divorce, job loss, health crisis, death of someone you love, creates ashes. The question isn't whether you'll have ashes, you will, but what you'll do with them. Most of us try to clean them up as quickly as possible, to get rid of the evidence that something burned down, to pretend we can just move on without being changed by what happened. But shadow work asks you to sit with the ashes for a while, to let them teach you what they know about impermanence, about resilience, about the strange beauty that emerges from destruction. Some of the most powerful people I know are the ones who've learned to see their ashes as sacred. The woman who turned her experience of domestic violence into advocacy work that saved dozens of other women. The man who channeled his grief over his son's suicide into creating support groups for other bereaved parents. The artist who transforms her experiences with addiction into performances that help other people feel less alone in their struggles. They're not grateful for the trauma. That would be spiritual bypassing of the highest order. But they've learned to honor what grew from the ashes, to recognize that some kinds of wisdom only come through burning down and rebuilding. Here's what I've learned after years of doing this work, both personally and with others. The game of ring around the Rosie never actually ends. You fall down, you get back up, you join hands with whoever's available, and you start the circle again. Life is a series of cycles, beginnings and endings, growth and decay, connection and loss, building up and falling down. The shadow work isn't about transcending these cycles or finding a way to avoid the falling. It's about learning to participate fully in all of it. It's about holding hands with other people who are also walking around the same circle, carrying their own pocket full of whatever helps them feel brave. It's about singing together, even when the song is scary, especially when the song is scary. It's about discovering that you can fall down and still be okay, that endings can be beautiful, that ashes can be fertile, that death itself might not be the enemy you thought it was, but just another part of the dance. So here we are at the end of our journey through the shadow wisdom of nursery rhymes. We've sung about falling babies and crumbling bridges and crooked paths, and, finally, about the ultimate falling that awaits us all. If you've done the work, really done it, not just read about it, you're different now than you were when we started. You've looked at parts of yourself and the human experience that you might have preferred to keep hidden. You've practiced being with difficulty instead of running from it. You've learned that the songs that scared you as a child were actually trying to teach you how to be brave. Most importantly, you've discovered that you don't have to carry any of this alone. There are circles everywhere full of people who are also learning to dance with their shadows, also practicing falling gracefully, also figuring out what it means to be human in a world that includes both beauty and terror, connection and lost love and death. The children in that classroom at the beginning of this book, they had it right all along. They knew that the scariest things become manageable when you do them together, with joy, as part of something bigger than your individual fear. They knew that falling down isn't the end of the game. It's just the beginning of getting back up. Ring around the shadow, a pocket full of truth. Ashes, ashes, we all heal through. So go ahead, join the circle, take someone's hand, sing the scary songs, fall down when it's time to fall down, and trust that there will always be others there to fall with you and to help you get back up when you're ready to dance again. After all, we're all in this together, this beautiful, terrifying, magnificent game of being human. And the best part? The music never stops playing.